we still import a lot of stuff out of Europe, machinery, other bits and pieces that we need to keep our economy going. Now, if that's not leaving Europe, as some of the shortages are happening coming out of American factories, where they just haven't caught up, and they look at supplying their own people first, is we'll lose out. So we'll have to find resupply of machinery and stuff like that.
Other countries or continents like Europe and America always have an effect on Australia, just because like some powerhouse countries just will control that side. So yeah, we'll move to the global economy. And the first point that we were going to go through is the shortages growing in Europe. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but especially the firewood. Is anything else you see shortages in Europe that will kind of make its way to Australia, or just happening right now, showing signs of issues?
Coming out of Europe, not a lot. The biggest one that I'm watching is what the wheat harvest is in Ukraine, because Ukraine's one of the largest growers of wheat, and seeing how the flow-on effect of that's going to have, because that's going to create food shortages, especially in Europe, where they rely on a lot of that wheat for foods, for staples, breads and stuff. The biggest one that I found was really interesting was when Russia turned off Nord Stream. They said it was because there was a fault in the pipeline. There hasn't been a fault in the pipeline, mind you, for 8-9 years or something ridiculous. They just turned it off. And as soon as that happened, factories shut. So when you don't have enough energy, your factories have to slow down. So the stuff that we produce here in Australia, when we start having the big energy crunch that's coming, a lot of our factories will slow down. Our food manufacturing, our food processing, and all that sort of stuff will change, because they might only be able to run 4 or 5 hours a day. They'll have to ration, or find some way of generating their own power, but they won't be able to use a generator because that's diesel, and there'll be no diesel. So these are the things that are quite interesting. I did notice that France has stopped decommissioning any new nuclear power, and Australia won't even discuss nuclear power. So I don't know how we're going to meet the energy demand. Back to that dense energy thing. Watch this winter in Europe, because it's really going to dictate, I think, how this whole story plays out for the elites with their thing. If the people, and at the moment the European farmers are the front line in Europe, and they are the ones that are on the war footing to really keep the protests up about this great reset, because they're the ones that have been affected the most. So if you create a food shortage, people starve, you reduce the population, easier to control a smaller population than a larger population. Plus, the middle classes have to stand up. And at the moment, I'm not seeing the middle class protect its own patch. And that's we saw that here in Australia, that the middle class didn't stand up to protect its own patch at the last election. We've definitely seen it in France. It's in France and Italy and all that. It's always the farmers. It's always the truck drivers. It's always those people that are standing up, because they're the ones that get hit the hardest first, but then they're not backed up by the middle class. And that's what really needs to happen in Europe for us to really see a massive change in Europe. But if that doesn't happen, and Europe really goes downhill this winter, watch this space, because it will have massive flow-on effects to Australia. Yeah.
So what kind of effects would it have in Australia, do you think, if they don't?
So it could actually, and I was talking to a friend of mine who is in Malta, and he goes, if we have a bad winter where people die and it's really bad, he said, Asia, watch out, and places like Australia, watch out for the influx of North African and African migrants, because they all come this way rather than go that way. Right. So that's one thing that could happen, is the change of migrant flow, illegal migrants. The other thing is we still import a lot of stuff out of Europe, machinery, other bits and pieces that we need to keep our economy going. Now, if that's not leaving Europe, as some of the shortages are happening coming out of American factories, where they just haven't caught up, and they look at supplying their own people first, is we'll lose out. So we'll have to find resupply of machinery and stuff like that. Europe is a big thing for process machinery. So a lot of the machinery that powers our factories comes out of Europe, mainly Germany and the Netherlands and the like. So watch this space. That they'll be the key over this next 6 months.